In this lesson, we're going to look at the male reproductive system, part 2, and I'm going to refer back to this worksheet that you had in the previous lesson. We did number 1 and 2, the first two outcomes that is expected by the IEB, which means the labeling of both the front and side view of the male reproductive system, as well as the function of the parts. So it's always a good idea to go back and watch the first video again so you can just revise the names and the functions of all those parts. But let's look at what we're doing in this lesson. We're continuing with the male reproductive system, but on the second page of that worksheet, it gives you questions 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and we're going to look at them individually. So the first one there says, list the changes in the male reproductive system and other physiological changes that occur in the body during puberty. All the changes that occur in the male body during puberty is associated with the increased production of testosterone, the male hormone. And all these characteristics that you see in these bullets are what we call the secondary sexual characteristics. And these are luckily very easy to remember because our bodies go through these. Well, if you're a guy, these would be familiar. And these include increased muscle mass, development of a deeper voice, enlargement of the penis and testes, production of sperm, increased production of sweat, more facial hair and body hair, skin becomes more oily, and then obviously behavioral changes like mood swings and emotional outbreaks. So these are normal things that we see as puberty starts. So the question also says other physiological changes. So let's look at what hormonal changes gets these changes in puberty. Why does this happen? There are certain hormones that are secreted that causes this. And it also kind of answers the next question, question 4. What happens at the beginning of puberty is that the pituitary gland secretes 2 main hormones. Now remember, we've learned about the pituitary gland that's found in the brain. It can also be called the master gland, and it makes a lot of different hormones. But the 2 hormones that is very important for the onset of puberty is LH and FSH. LH stands for luteinizing hormone, and FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. The function of follicle stimulating hormone that is going to cause germinal epithelium cells, which are found inside the seminiferous tubules of the testes. It's going to cause these germinal epithelium cells to undergo division to form sperm. Now, the process whereby sperm is produced is called spermatogenesis. So always remember the word Genesis sounds like the first book in the Bible, which means the beginning or the start of something. So spermatogenesis literally means the start or the beginning of sperm. Easy to remember. But hang on, I know this word germinal epithelium is a massive big word. So where do we find germinal epithelium cells? If we look at this diagram, this is a micrograph or a photograph of a microscope slide where a seminiferous tubules inside the testis has been cut through, and we're looking into this tube. And you can see all the zillions of little red cells all around will develop into sperm. On the very outside of the seminiferous tubule, the first line of cells is called germinal epithelium cells. And these are the cells that will start dividing, and as they divide, forming new cells, the new cells get pushed towards the inside of the tube. Eventually, all these cells, after division, will end up being sperm cells, and you can see in the very center of this picture all the little tails of the sperm as their heads are still embedded in the other little cells around. On this microscope slide, you can also see same picture but a differently stained image. Germinal epithelium cells right on the outside, developing sperm as we move inward, and then the sperm heads embedded in the tube still on the inside. Perhaps it's easier just to look at a drawing, because when we look at the drawing, we can see the germinal epithelium cells is the innermost layer of the testes. It forms a wall inside the seminiferous tubules within the testes, and then from this layer of germinal epithelium cells, the sperm develop through a process called meiosis. Now, meiosis is very shortly what we did in grade 10, but we will soon look at that in more detail. Now, going back to the questions, it says that we need to explain how a germinal epithelium actually changes into sperm by meiosis. Now, please note there that the question says no details, which means the IEB is expecting you to know the basics. In your textbook, there's probably a huge amount of information about the division of germinal epithelium into sperm, but you just have to know the basics, as I said, and this diagram is kind of it. This is all you need to know. Germinal epithelium cells divide by meiosis into 4 cells that each becomes a sperm, and the process is known as spermatogenesis. You don't have to know any of the other steps in between germinal epithelium and sperm. This is all you need to know, really basic. Now, when we look at a cross-section of a seminiferous tubule, we also need to be able to distinguish between the positions of the Leydig cells and the Sertoli cells. What the heck are those? So when we look at this diagram again of a Sertoli cell, we can clearly see the germinal epithelium on the outside, and then on the inside of the seminiferous tubules, there's these big, huge cells called Sertoli cells. Now, they are there to feed the maturing sperm as they develop, from germinal epithelium into sperm cells. The Sertoli cells are quite big, and on here you can actually see how there's quite a few developing sperm almost docked into or feeding into the Sertoli cell. On the outside of the seminiferous tubules is where we find these groups of cells called Leydig cells, and they're the ones that make testosterone. If we zoom into one of these Sertoli cells, this is what we'll see. You can actually see the heads of the sperm embedded in the Sertoli cell as it gets food. You're also expected, and this is number 6, to be able to make an annotated drawing of a sperm to show its functions and its other parts. Now, in case you forgot, we learned about it in grade 10 and 11. An annotated drawing is when you make a drawing, but most of the marks go for the labels around. So the labels shouldn't just be one-word labels. It should be descriptive labels. So take some time. You can pause the video here and copy this picture down. You need to, in an exam, be able to label and draw this diagram of the sperm. Within the head of the sperm, we can see that there are 2 structures. The one is called the nucleus, which contains 23 chromosomes. The nucleus of the sperm will actually combine or fuse with the nucleus of the ovum during fertilization to produce a baby. The other structure found in the head of the sperm is called an acrosome, and the acrosome contains enzymes which will cause or help the sperm to actually go into the ovum when it meets the ovum, because those enzymes in the acrosome will eat through or digest through the coating that surrounds the ovum. The midpiece of the sperm contains plenty of mitochondria, and it's the mitochondria that provide the energy for the movement or the locomotion of the sperm. Right at the top we can see the tail, and obviously the tail is the one that is used for propulsion. That's the one that makes the sperm move. So you are welcome to pause the video here and copy this picture down if you like. Otherwise, you can also find it in your textbook. Have a look at this quickly. This is a cross-section of the head of the sperm as it's embedded in the Sertoli cell. And you can see the chromosomes in the front, which is found in the nucleus. And then right behind it, the red area, underneath it actually, is the acrosome, which contains the enzymes. So the last question on the outcomes is that you need to be able to distinguish between the terms semen and sperm and the terms erection and ejaculation. When we talk about sperm, we're referring to the sexual reproductive cells only, like the diagram that we just looked at. However, the word semen means the sperm inside the seminal fluid. So the combination of the fluids with the sperm inside is called semen. An erection is obviously the physiological phenomenon where the penis becomes erect and enlarged. And that's where we looked at the label earlier, where we said the erectile tissue expands and becomes larger when it's filled with blood. So that occurs during sexual intercourse. During an erection, obviously, we'll have ejaculation take place, and that is the actual moment where the semen is released from the penis during intercourse. Now, the IEB doesn't distinctly in its acts say that you need to know about reproductive diseases or conditions. However, there are certain topics that they love asking questions about, especially source-based questions. So please make a note of this in your summaries. The first one is an enlarged prostate gland. Now, we learned earlier in the first lesson that the prostate gland creates prostate fluid, which feeds and nourishes the seminal fluid where the sperm is found in. Now, we can see on a diagram like this that the prostate gland actually is situated around the urethra. So prostate problems is the biggest problem in men as they age. In fact, prostate cancer is the #1 cancer found in males. When the prostate gland enlarges, it pinches the urethra and the man will find it difficult to urinate. And this is one of the key symptoms of prostate cancer. The second topic isn't really a disease, but rather a procedure called the vasectomy. And we're actually going to look at this when we do contraception later in the chapter as well. And a vasectomy is just a procedure whereby the vas deferens is cut on both sides, the left and the right testes, which means it's impossible for the sperm to go into the vas deferens and impregnate a woman. So vasectomy is used as a procedure, a contraceptive measure. A man would do that to not have a baby, in other words, to not be able to make a baby. The vas deferens is actually cut right here in this position. So it's a really small little incision that's made through the scrotum. The man goes in the morning, it's about 20 minutes, and they're out of the operating room. Easy. So the last topic that they love asking in a paper regarding the male reproductive system is circumcision. Now that's an operation that is done to remove the man's foreskin, as shown on these pictures. So it may be done for religious, social, medical, or cultural reasons, but a man can actually live without the foreskin. Scientifically, medically speaking, there isn't a specific purpose or function of the foreskin. There is some evidence, obviously, that indicates that it lowers the risk of some sexually transmitted diseases if a man has a foreskin, probably because bodily fluids or pathogens can easily collect underneath the foreskin, between the head of the penis and the foreskin. If that happens, it's easier to transmit various diseases. So if it's been removed, that makes it a little bit more difficult.